Welcome into the KSL Sports front page for Friday, November 6th. I'm Kyle Ireland, and alongside me today is our University of Utah insider, host of the Crimson Corner podcast, Trevor Allen. And before we get going in, some questions out there from our audience today, our listeners, our viewers, and we can see any comments that you guys have. So if you're viewing this on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, feel free to chime in on the conversation. We'd love to be able to interact and any questions that you have about the things that we'll be discussing on today's front page, feel free to, be part of the conversation and let Trevor know if you have any comments about Utah's season opener. And let's start there, Trevor, on this edition of the KSL Sports front page. The University of Utah came out today, said that the season opener, which was scheduled for just tomorrow against the Arizona Wildcats, has now been canceled due to COVID-19 related issues with the program. Players have tested positive for the virus, and we've seen here even today the state of Utah broke its previous record from yesterday with total amount of cases that people tested positive for COVID-19, a record number of deaths in the state of Utah today as well. So it's a pretty widespread issue throughout the Beehive State, but it's affected the University of Utah football program and setting their season opener back now, and they won't play the Arizona Wildcats. Let's start there. Trevor, what did you make of, the fact that you're no longer going to be covering a game that you were ready and, the players were prepared to play in, and everybody was kind of ramping up for tomorrow afternoon?
Kyle, it sucked, honestly. I was locked and loaded and ready to go up to the stadium tomorrow morning, and I've been prepping all week for it, and to have it come down to this, really, it really sucks. I mean, you can't put it in any other way, but I can't even imagine, like, not only for Utah, but also for Arizona, because it's the second Pac-12 game that will not be played in the opening week. And, it sucks, but it sounds like over the last 24 hours, the University of Utah program for football, they've had some positive cases, and it sounds like it's more than one, and they weren't able to put the so when the Pac-12 announced they were going to come back, they had to put together some guidelines and for things that would cause games to be canceled, and one of them is to not have the minimum amount of players at certain positions. So you had to have at least like one quarterback and I think like 7 linemen and things like that. Right. So Utah did not have that number eligible to play because of having to isolate, and then you have to go back to all the contact tracing, and it just got to the point where Utah did not want to risk having very few amount of players available for them on Saturday, and so that's what caused them to submit to the Pac-12, them pulling out of the game, and now it is now declared a no contest. But for how many months that we've had to wait to watch the Utes play, what is another week? I guess it is 2020, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy though. I mean, we've already seen, the BYU program, for instance, earlier in their season, they started, on time, I guess you could say, with their schedule, even though they had to make some adjustments. But BYU had a game against Army get postponed and may not get rescheduled. And now you've got this no contest. So we've had multiple games affected now by COVID-19 and cases. And I saw, you put out another piece just before we hopped online about, some comments that Mark Harlan and Kyle Whittingham had to say about the cancellation. What did you make of their comments, and what specifically did they say as they addressed this canceled game?
So, as Harlan put it, he said that, it was very, very difficult to, have to deal with this, but it is absolutely the right choice. And I'm not saying that Utah's in the wrong for this. I mean, I'm not up there. I'm not talking to players and coaches. Kyle Whittingham has already said he's not telling us anything about this, of how many players test positive. Obviously, they're not going to tell you who tests positive, but let alone how many have test positive, or having to isolate due to contact tracing. But so for them to, it's really tough because, for one, you're losing one of your home games, and you only get 3 of them, and potentially 4 depending on that 7th game. But to lose that on top of it being your season opener, you've been working so hard for the last month in camp, and just to see that happen. But that's what Mark Harlan and Kyle Whittingham and the leaders of the University of Utah are paid to do, and that is to lead the program and do what is best for their program. And that's exactly what Mark Harlan has said. And then Kyle Whittingham, had the same kind of comments, just a lot shorter. Harlan kind of went into the whole backstory of how it happened and getting in contact with the conference and with the AD down in Arizona. But Kyle Whittingham, just said that there is no question it was the right decision to make. Student athletes, the health and well-being is absolutely paramount and we will not put them at risk. That was the main thing of what stood out to me. And Kyle Whittingham has said that the entire camp is that, healthy, and that this is uncharted territory, and they're just trying to tread through these waters. And I feel like that it was the right move. It sucks for everybody, but just chalk it up as another thing that 2020 bites us,
Yeah, I mean, it has been a crazy year, and you now see the Utes push back their season opener a week. You've got, I feel so bad for, the game prep, especially because these players and coaches have put so much time and effort into just focusing on the Arizona Wildcats. And now that game prep, that specific prep that is different than just your, ramping up, getting ready for the season, getting in some, fundamental work and those types of things. I mean, you get some of that every single week, right? But the specifics that, hey, this is what we're going to do because of Khalil Tate, for instance, like all that now is thrown out the window, and Utah turns its head to another opponent now as they move forward with their schedule. But the fact that, they have, isolation now and these types of things, that could potentially play into, the fact that they have less time to prepare as effectively as they would like to for their remaining schedule. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and not only that, Kyle, but there's two things to look at here. One, Utah's next game is Friday, so it had they played on Saturday, it would have been a short turnaround, a Friday night primetime game against the UCLA Bruins in the Rose Bowl. But you look at that could all, but with all of these positive tests, we don't know how many, but it is multiple. How long are they going to be out, and is that game on Friday in jeopardy? Because normally if you just play on Saturday again, that gives you 7 days to get these guys to, figure out if you're going to have enough guys to be able to field a team and to be able to play in these games without putting your student athletes at risk. And to have that game, be a day earlier, it could very well jeopardize it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. We might not have another game until the USC game, which, talk about a great way to open up the season, is against a team that is technically picked to win the Pac-12 or at least the South Division on top of that. And they would have 2 games under their belt at that time. And, I've actually been saying all along that playing against the Arizona Wildcats, playing against the UCLA Bruins, that was a big thing for Utah going into this season, because they're 2, I don't want to say weaker teams, but there's really not another word to put in there, that Utah could get, especially having such a young secondary, to get these guys used to the college game, and to be able to have them get some games under their belt before you go up against an air raid offense and probably one of the best offenses in the Pac-12. It definitely is going to put a hamper on them. But I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll all be, healed up by then, and then all the tests will come back negative. That's obviously the hope, but we don't even know if they're going to play a game next Friday. But it does suck for not only Utah, because they were prepping for the Wildcats, but the Wildcats were having to do a lot more prep because Utah wasn't telling them who the quarterback is. And so,
Yeah.
It's just also another week that we're going to have to wait to see who the quarterback is, potentially too. And so, it just sucks all around, but obviously it is the right choice to make.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. I also am wondering, any potential long-term effects that this might have. Not just the fact that they're losing a game to open the season, but we're talking about games played and the total amount of wins that you have that can potentially affect rankings. It obviously is not going to really impact Utah's quest. I mean, if they take care of business in the Pac-12 South, right, they're still going to be in a position to do what they want in the conference. But you've got teams that are. I look at Trevor Lawrence and Clemson, right? Like they're going into a top 4, top 5 matchup this week against Notre Dame, and they don't have their starting quarterback for the second straight week. And so we've seen what COVID-19 has done to other programs. And, obviously the ACC has a different protocol as far as COVID-19 is concerned than the Pac-12 versus, teams like BYU. There's just so many different hurdles that need to be overcome, I guess, by a lot of these programs. And now that Utah is kind of in the thick of a tough situation, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I know that you're going to have all of this story covered throughout the week leading up to that UCLA game on KSLSports.com and also the KSL Sports app. Yeah, across your fingers
that we even play that we
get that game. But everybody, feel free to download the KSL Sports app and check out that and follow along the coverage that Trevor has throughout the week as we kind of move through this weekend, where there isn't going to be a University of Utah football game, but hopefully there is one next week against UCLA. Moving on to another team that is being impacted by COVID-19 in the state of Utah is Real Salt Lake. Now, contrary to the University of Utah, who was trying to open their season, Real Salt Lake is now trying to wrap up its season. The 2020 MLS season is coming to a close for RSL now that they've been eliminated from postseason contention. But today it came out, the team announced that there was a player that tested positive for COVID-19 ahead of the team's match against Sporting KC on Sunday. What did you make of this? I mean, obviously, like we've talked about on the site over the last week or so, a lot of, pieces up on RSL by Tom Hackett about, the team now, not fighting for postseason contention or anything like that, but that this kind of puts a wrench into things as far as, wrapping up things against Sporting KC.
A lot of it is that these guys just want to finish strong. I mean, they've obviously been struggling for the last month, and it shows because they're not going to be going to the playoffs this year. And to have, a player test positive on top of that, I think I saw somewhere on Twitter that one of the Sporting Kansas City players tested positive for COVID-19 today. And so we don't even know if this game's even going to be played.
Yeah.
But again, it wouldn't really have any kind of, effect on RSL because they're out of the playoffs, but it would affect Sporting Kansas City, a team who frankly is sitting in one of the top 3 spots in the Western Conference table right now. And so, it would definitely be a big problem for them to not have that game in there. But I know that they're doing things a little bit differently as far as playoffs, but it just goes to show, Kyle, that with these raging numbers, like I even saw, a story. By the way, I actually got an iPhone, Kyle, so I'm getting these like Apple News alerts. It's kind of crazy, it kind of opens up my whole world. And I know I'm talking to the Apple expert here, but seeing that there's record numbers in the country for COVID cases, and it's just going to show that right now, and it shows that we're in a really strange time right now, and it's just a better reminder to mask up, social distance, and don't go out into public places unless you absolutely need to. And so Kyle, you and I are going to be hunkered down here at our homes, doing some BYU football and getting ready for some prep football as well tonight. But this is just a reminder for just seeing what Utah is going through right now and what RSL is going through right now. It could happen in your own life.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, hopefully we can see the case numbers in the state of Utah go back down to, the way that they were a couple of months ago and, even smaller than that. Because, the way things are surging, it's amazing. I mean, I put out a piece yesterday down in St. George. You mentioned prep sports. We were wondering if the high school playoffs were going to be impacted as far as high school football is concerned. Because St. George canceled nearly 10 events down in the city, over the next few weeks. And that's just, it's crazy to see what the impact has been on all of these programs from back in March to the Utah Jazz. And then, being able to restart the season. Now we're seeing it impacting college football on a weekly basis. And Utah clearly is being impacted in their, quest to kick off the season, and now RSL as they wrap things up. But if that match against Sporting Kansas City happens on Sunday at 4:30 p.m., you can catch that game on the KSL Sports app, the KSL TV app, and on KSLSports.com. Last thing before we go today, Trevor, we've got a big game tonight. The BYU Cougars they're going to be taking on the Boise State Broncos. Now, BYU is, they're on I won't say quest for perfection, because I know that is a risky phrase to throw around in the state of Utah, even
next to
a decade later now. But
Yeah.
the BYU Cougars are 7-0. They're ranked number 9 in the country. You've got Boise State, who's going to be hosting BYU up on the Smurf turf tonight, and they're 21st in the country. So we've got a top 25 matchup. You've got BYU, who's really, it's going to probably be the toughest game they've played this season or will play this season. And then you've got, everything in front of them at this point. I think that it's a little hyperbolic to, talk about college football playoff contention at this point, but you never know. But I think the New Year's Six is clearly on the table for this team if they run things throughout the final weeks of the season, assuming that they don't add any other games like the Army game that was postponed earlier in the season. But what do you think of this matchup tonight? Zach Wilson, who was really just a play away from beating Boise State on their home field 2 years ago as a freshman, and then BYU's never won against the Broncos up in Boise. So a lot of things that BYU, can overcome, and, goals that can be reached or help them, continue their path to reach some of those goals if they come out with a win tonight. What do you make of this game, and what are you looking forward to seeing most?
It's kind of crazy, Kyle, because you and I both know a couple of months ago, this game wasn't even scheduled because the Mountain West wasn't even going to play.
Well, it was scheduled, and then it got canceled.
Well, canceled.
And then it got re-added.
But then even when the Mountain West came out and said we're doing conference only, they allowed San Diego State and Boise State to play BYU, which was really nice of the Mountain West, because that took away one of the conference games for Boise, and as well as San Diego State. But we would probably still be talking about another lower tier team, but this really could put BYU to that test, because if you look at what they've done, they've basically, I don't want to say every game, but they've steamrolled every opponent. Some of them have been a little bit closer than what they would have liked, but they haven't really been tested. And I think that this could be a game where you've actually got a team who's going into their 8th game of the year, and then you have another team who's going into their 3rd game of the year, and you have 2 ranked opponents. You're up at a place that you've never won before, and you don't know some of the mindset of some of these players as you're steamrolling opponents. And you've got all of this hype around your program, college football playoff or New Year's Six at least, and Zach Wilson potentially being a candidate for the Heisman Trophy and things like that. You don't know where some of the mindset of these guys are as they are getting ready for this game, because you can't overlook anybody. And BYU definitely can't overlook Boise State. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys react to being able to go up there at a place that, and I'm sure that they've heard about it all the time, that there is in a place where they haven't won, and try and sneak out a win in prime time on Friday night. And, not only that, but then what happens after that, because really the only challenge you have left is San Diego State. And you also have a couple of weeks where you don't have a game. So there's going to be a lot that comes out of this game, especially say that BYU loses this game. I know that Cougar fans don't want to hear that. Where does this team lie among the rankings? How far do they drop? What are their chances as far as New Year's Six or even college football playoff? And if Zach Wilson doesn't have that Heisman type performance, where does he stand in that as well? But then if they have a great game and win, then where do you put them? Because then you've got a couple of weeks off where you're not talking about, who they're playing, and then they're playing North Alabama and then you have San Diego State. So, this is going to be a big test for BYU. I'm really interested to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I think that this game is clearly, one that, like you said, it could either, really just wreck BYU season as far as goals and aspirations that have been built up through the first 7 games of the season. And, or it could also, you talk about if they win this game, they're ranked number 9 in the country right now. What does a win over a top 25 team do to this program that hasn't played a ranked team yet this season? Does it launch them up a spot or two in the top 10? Because you look at, I mean, Mitch Harper, he put out a piece earlier in the week. I think it was Kirk Herbstreit that had BYU knocking on the top four. I think he had them sixth on
Logan Wilson.
on his personal rankings. And so, messed up the name there a little bit,
A
but
little bit.
just a little bit.
He
But
got the last name right.
But I think it's interesting because you've got, some national talking heads who clearly love BYU and what they've seen from Zach Wilson and the Cougars this season. But like you said, this is a real test for BYU. And if they can come away with a big road victory, I mean, let's not forget, BYU's only played on the road twice thus far this season. They've only played on the road against Navy and against Houston. Navy obviously was a blowout game, but Houston for the first three quarters really put a nice test up for BYU. And before they, went on that streak of just, nearly 30 points towards the end of that game was kind of in question for the Cougars. And then they handled business there throughout the fourth quarter. But I think that there's so much on the line for this game. Mitch Harper, on Cougar Tracks talked about, how big of a game this is. There are people that are talking about, is this the biggest game for BYU since the national championship year in 1984? I don't know if it's that big yet. It may potentially end up being that big of a game. I mean, let's say BYU's, in playoff contention after this season's all said and done as far as the regular season is concerned. But right now I'm thinking, hey, it's definitely the biggest game BYU's had since at least 2001, when they were 12-0 at one point in that season before they lost to Hawaii and then Louisville in the Liberty Bowl. And then you've got 1996 where they went and had a 14-win season. So there's a lot to talk about tonight. I'm interested in seeing the quarterback battle, who Boise State's going to put on the field to actually play quarterback. Hank Bachmeier, the fact that, Jack Sears ended up starting for the Broncos in their last game after Bachmeier started in the first game. Who plays quarterback for Boise State tonight? And then their running back, George Holani, he ended up having an injury in the last game. So is he going to play against the BYU Cougars tonight? I'm interested to see kind of if we see a full Boise State team, how healthy they are, because the healthier Boise State is, the greater the test is for BYU. And I also think that, you kind of want to see a fully loaded Broncos squad, because you don't want to have any asterisks next to that win saying, oh, well,
Boise any other State ones, that is.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to say, hey, BYU won that game, but Boise State didn't have their starting running back. They didn't have their starting quarterback. The more question, I mean, a win is still a win, right? We've seen that because BYU 7-0 and they're in the top 10, which they haven't been able to do in a decade. And so clearly winning is the most important thing, no matter who you're playing. But if they can, win against a stronger opponent, I think that bodes well for BYU's, not only their New Year's Six chances, but possibly talking about the college football playoff later on in the season.
Something that I will add to this for all the BYU fans tuning in right now. It doesn't matter who their quarterback is, whether it's Bachmeier or Sears, they're both legit, because people say, well, if a Bachmeier doesn't play, who's this Sears guy? He is a USC transfer. He's a guy who
he was lights out last week too. He had a really good game.
He had a really good game against the Air Force Falcons. But keep in mind, the only reason why he transferred from USC is because a guy named Keaton Slovis took over and just took everyone by storm over in LA. So Jack Sears is a really good quarterback. So is a Hank Bachmeier. So regardless of who suits up at that position, as long as it's one of those two, the Broncos are going to be in really good shape. But as you mentioned, the running back, that one would be a huge hit if he doesn't play tonight.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we'll have all of that covered for you on the KSL Sports app and on KSLSports.com. That game kicks off tonight at 7:45 Mountain. You can catch all of the action on TV. It's going to be broadcast on FS1 and then on radio on KSL News Radio. You can check that out on the KSL News Radio app, or tune in on 1168 AM or 102.7 FM. The Broncos this season through two games are allowing 263 yards on the ground. And so I expect a nice running attack effort by Tyler Algier and Lopini Katoa from BYU tonight. But that'll do it for this week's edition, or not this week's edition, but today's edition of the KSL Sports Front Page as we wrap up things on a Friday. You can follow Trevor on Twitter at Trevor A Sports. You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Ireland. Be sure to follow the KSL Sports accounts as well at KSL Sports. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We even have a TikTok. And, check out the KSL Sports app, whether you have an Android device, iPhone, iPad, whatever. Be sure to download the KSL Sports app. We'll be back again on Monday for the KSL Sports Front Page, Monday at 4 p.m. to wrap up the weekend of sports. Unfortunately, no Utah football, but we'll have
All
a BYU
I wanted
game.
was one game. I just
we'll have a
wanted one
BYU
game, Kyle.
to talk about, Trevor. We'll have a rivalry, opposite of the rivalry that is, to talk about. And then we'll also have a big weekend of locals in the NFL that we can talk about. We've got NFL football, week number 9 of the NFL season. We'll wrap up on Monday at 4 p.m. Until then, be sure to check out the KSL Sports app and KSLSports.com. Have fun watching the BYU game.